The Great Reset of 2022. Are you ready for the Great Reset of 2022? The world counts on the cost of the pandemic, deals with soaring inflation and an energy crisis, witnesses a war in Ukraine, and mass protests all over the globe. The policymakers want us to focus on the community, the environment, society. They want to push us towards a new global order, new consumer habits, new energy consumption, and new financial systems where we, little people, will own nothing and be happy. In today's video, we will discuss Robert Kiyosaki and Mark Moss's take on the recent developments in the world and talk a lot about the WEF, the World Economic Forum organization, and its influence on the world's future. Hopefully, it will open your eyes to many recent events often described as a global reset of 2022. If you are watching our video for the first time or haven't subscribed to our channel yet, please do so, and don't forget to push the bell icon to be notified whenever we upload a new video. So, let's begin. Robert Kiyosaki is a famous financial author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, a successful investor and businessman. He has been educating people on financial literacy and financial freedom for several decades now. His latest work, Capitalist Manifesto: How Entrepreneurs Can Save Capitalism, Kiyosaki claims that communist ideals are taught in our schools and universities, which has a lot to answer for our recent economic troubles. He believes it's time to fight back with the correct information. In his recent interviews, he often quotes Mark Moss, a full-time investor, entrepreneur, and a curious self-made researcher on economics, finance, and public policies. Recently, Mark Moss completed the report on the WEF, the World Economic Forum organization founded in 1971, and its founder, Klaus Schwab. 1971 was a special year in the history of the United States and the whole world. This was when America went off the gold standard and started printing money, which distorted the financial system. Mark Moss invited us to visit the website, which is called WTFHappened1971.com, where we can see over 100 charts showing how different aspects of life have changed since 1971. U.S. national debt, personal income and savings, medium income debt, purchasing power, birth rate, divorce rate, consumer price index, obesity of population. All this and many other things have been seriously affected by the abundance of the gold standard in 1971. Mr. Moss explains, a lot of people might have heard of something like Davos, where every year the world's leaders meet. They are often called world elite. It's politicians and business people getting together in Davos, Switzerland, and they try to figure out a better, more equitable way to run the world. Mark Moss thinks that every time the word equitable is used, that means that policymakers are talking about Marxism. And what is hidden behind this is that businesses and people in general shouldn't focus on profit and personal benefit, but instead, they should focus on the community, ESG, environmental and social governance. They want to make people and businesses to be more equitable, and they want to do it through power and control, forcing people to comply instead of educating them and showing them better ways. That is why they have the public-private partnership of the World Economic Forum. So, what does it mean for ordinary people? That means that if you don't follow their policies, there will be no money, no investment, and no freedom. Mark Moss likes to quote Henry Kissinger, American politician and geopolitical consultant, who once said, "If you control the food, you control the people. If you control the energy, you can control the continent. If you control the money, you control the world." Let's see, for example, at what's going on in Sri Lanka today. People are starving and rotting now. The country's debt-laden economy has collapsed as it runs out of money to pay for food, fuel, and medicine. But some years ago, the government of Sri Lanka was saying that by 2025, they were going to be one of the wealthiest nations in the world, being the best on ESG scores. In April 2021, the president banned imports of chemical fertilizers, forcing Sri Lanka's millions of farmers to go organic. It proved disastrous, as a group of experts and scientists had warned. Sri Lanka has the best ESG score in the world at 98 out of 100, but its economy is in free fall. The country has defaulted on its bonds. They got no money. They don't have any money to import energy, so they have no energy. Nobody lends them money anymore, and the country has collapsed. So this was an example of central planning and policy reinforcement. It is the way the World Economic Forum wants to rule the world, and they do it through different organizations: the World Health Organization, the World Trade Organization, the World Meteorological Association, the UN, the IMF, and the BIS. Most people do not know what BIS is. This is the Bank of International Settlements and the central bank of central banks. If we drew the organizational chart of the world, the BIS would sit at the top. Below the BIS, we have WEF, WHO, and the Club of Rome, the Policymakers. So they develop policies and push them down to the next row in the organizational chart, to the policy enforcers, the governments. So it's a group of bankers who use the BIS at the top to push these ideas down to the population. Klaus Schwab is running this. He sits on top of the world, meeting with all these politicians and businessmen who are flying their private jets over to Davos, telling us that we need to cut back on our energy, stop eating meat, and start eating bugs to have a more sustainable environment in the world. Just think about it. A few weeks ago, the WEF sponsored a commercial from Nicole in which she ate bugs. That's what they're putting on TV now. The articles about how it is good that we all start eating insects can be found on the WEF website. So, as Mark Moss explains, food is the first attack vector of Davos policymakers. A couple of weeks ago, the UN published an article on its website titled "The Benefits of World Hunger," written by retired Hawaiian professor George Kent. The article explains how hunger is needed to recruit workers for low-level manual jobs. The point of the article was, we need people to be starving because all these jobs have to be done that nobody would do unless they were starving. The reaction to the article was so insane that the UN had to remove it from its website. Nevertheless, this shows us where policymakers are trying to lead the world. So, as we discussed, food is definitely under attack today. Believe it or not, we are running out of food. Recently, the UN announced that 868 million people would starve to death in the next 24 months, almost a billion. In the early 1900s, about 25 million people died from starvation. During Mao's Great Leap Forward, about 50 million people died from starvation. And now, we're talking about almost a billion people. And at a time when we have nearly a billion people that could be starving to death, shouldn't we be trying to get as much food as possible out? Why wouldn't we try to do everything we can? But in Holland, as Mark Moss points out, they shut down the farms, trying to take the farmers' land and stop them from growing food and raising cattle and meat. Massive protests are happening in Holland at the time, sort of like what we saw in Canada with the truckers, but now it's the farmers with their tractors doing insane things fighting for their freedom to do their job. Some of the farmers got arrested. They've been filling up the cities with machines. They blocked the airports. The fishermen have gotten involved blocking the ports. Some farmers even broke into the military base and dragged jets out and putting them on the roads. In the United States, we see that the farmers are being paid not to plant. They're not allowed to plant on their land, so they petitioned the Secretary of Agriculture and said, "Please, let us plant. We can get more food." And the answer was no. It's not in line with our agreement for the Paris Accord. which is the global framework to avoid dangerous climate change, which President Trump had pulled us out of. And Joe Biden, on his first day in office, the most important thing he had to do was to put us back into the Paris Accord agreement. So we can't grow food in the United States because of climate change. Holland can't grow food, and now the protests are spread to Poland, Germany, and other countries, and all the farmers are united in protest. In addition, there is also an energy crisis going on in Europe. Everybody should know by now that natural gas, of which a big portion comes from Russia, is used to produce fertilizers, and we need fertilizer to grow food and natural gas to process food. So due to the skyrocketing gas prices, it is even more challenging to produce enough food worldwide. So the energy is also under attack, as we see it around us lately. As winter approaches, we hear more people upset about their electricity bills. Energy becomes unaffordable both for private people and businesses, especially in Europe. Germany has lost its position because of that. The energy prices are too high, so the EU's on the verge of breaking up because of pigs countries. Portugal, Italy, Greece, and Spain, which are in debt and cannot sustain their economies since they do not have any production. Italy and Greece had to constantly be bailed out. Germany has been the production engine of Europe, but now because of the energy prices, they cannot afford to produce anymore. They have to import energy. But why? Because they have shut all the nuclear reactors off. And why? To save the environment. Well, over the last decade, they've been shutting them down, so their energy prices have gone up by 8 times. So in Europe, there was massive amounts of shale gas, but they don't want to get it for the same green reasons, pushed by the WEF. Mark Moss believes, and Robert Kiyosaki agrees, that we are at war right now where the world elite through the governments is trying to take our freedom away. Mark Moss explains, freedom of speech, freedom of payment, freedom of assembly, and so on. Without freedom of payment and freedom of money, there is no freedom at all. Even though we're guaranteed freedom of speech, if we don't have money to buy a phone, go on the internet, print a pamphlet, or build a website, we have no freedom of speech. And if I have freedom of assembly but can't pay to put gas in my truck to drive to the assembly, I have no freedom of assembly. So these policymakers, the neo-Marxists, think that if we could make a more equitable world, limit our freedom, take away private property, all these things that capitalism is standing for, then people will owe nothing and be happy. They think that right now we're unhappy because we don't have what we want. We're always striving. We always have to work harder. And if we take that away, make people own nothing, and then people will be happy because they won't need to strive and suffer anymore. But as Robert Kiyosaki and Mark Moss point out, it is vital to understand why central planning and policy reinforcement are not working. Globalists are trying to organize and centralize the world, but they fail because they don't have enough data. They don't take things into account that make us individuals. Mark Moss believes that individualism is great and necessary because if we're different, we can all see the same thing but draw different conclusions. We see problems and come up with different solutions so we can have more progress in the world as respected individuals living and working together, having free market and freedom to act in the world. As Robert Kiyosaki adds, it's called free market capitalism. It's tragic what's happening today, so we fight for our freedoms more than anything else. If someone wants to be a Marxist, that's okay, as long as you don't take my freedom away. So guys, this is the story for today. What do you think about this great reset? Tell us in the comment section below this video. If you enjoyed watching this video, leave a like, subscribe to this channel, and share this video with your friends. We will be back to you with another video. Until then, take care